Save Semantics, episode 362. It is January 26, 2026. My name is Myro. This is the podcast where I ramble on for a bit about some shit. Recording this on a Monday afternoon. Doing this after a weekend in which I have been sick. I've been sick for this entire weekend, going into Monday today. I feel I'm finally kind of in recovery mode. The only thing that I'm have right now is kind of a sore throat. So I'm gonna try not to speak too much, but I wanted to kind of just record because it has been a little while since I've done so. But yeah, it's been it's not only been, it hasn't been like the greatest weekend for myself or the greatest period of time for myself. I mean, there's a lot of changes that are happening, which I am grateful for, and a lot of things that, a lot of, I'm making a lot of, I'm doing a lot of things. Obviously I talked about this, but I'll be moving to New York for my job soon in a few weeks, and that's that's a huge that's a huge adjustment for me. So I feel I'm still kind of in the process of getting my things together, kind of going and checking if I have the right things. Right now I'm about to go and get myself like an extra suitcase just so I have enough to pack, enough space to pack all of my stuff, as much as I can, other than having to maybe ship out some stuff. But yeah, it's, there's a lot to kind of manage on that end. And yeah, we're kind of at this point once again, for anyone that's living in the US, just another kind of tumultuous period of time, with ICE in Minnesota, Minneapolis, and then, the murders of Renee Good and Alex Peretti. Like, it's a lot. And seeing kind of that over the weekend, it felt very almost like cyclical in the sense, in a similar vein. It's different. It's not that different. It is a state sponsored or state administered execution in a way, right? Similar to George Floyd in 2020 and all of the other police murders kind of expanding back into that time. But it feels kind of cyclical in that sense, where you have an administration that is pushing for, a forms of authoritarian kind of, rule and order, if you want to call it that, and then resulting in the deaths, or rather the killings of citizens, right? And it feels like a very, I mean, I don't know, it just feels just like we're kind of doing the same thing again, in a sense. Maybe that's just kind of what history is, all in all, where certain things get repeated, and the populace has to suffer because of the whims of a few people, right? I mean, it's not anything new, but it never is like, it's not like this like easy pill to swallow. You know what I mean? We are not that far removed, at least, or just people in general. I am not that far removed from a time where this type of action was almost silenced in a sense, or if it happened, it was not, it was just swept under the rug. Now with the viability of social media and the internet, all that stuff, like these things are so much more visible now, right? So I think it's always, there's this just, you know, there's just the awfulness that comes with that. I think that, and this is something that I had to sort of come to terms, or not come to terms with, but sort of had to remind myself to sort of calm down and not react out of anger. I think you can be actionable when you're angry, but I do think that it's a lot harder to be focused, right? A lot of people are angry, and I think that anger is only effective in certain instances. I think collective efforts come from not anger, but from a sense of unity and a desire for things to change, right? Essentially kind of converting whatever anger, frustration you have into something more productive. And that comes in the form of protests, donations, just general, I don't know, just checking in on the people that are affected, checking in with your, I don't know, community, that kind of thing, right? As opposed to lashing out and, being reactive as opposed to being proactive in a sense, right? So, that's something that I had to kind of remind myself. And I also had to remind myself, again, I was going to make a point earlier in saying this is not like a new development by any means. Like this has been a a thing where whenever there is some level of dissent by people against a regime, against the state in any way, shape, or form, those people often get affected through the loss of life. They lose their lives. They get killed by the police, by the FBI, CIA, like whatever, right? Like those things have happened historically, right? So it's not new. But it is still something that has to change, right? Obviously. I just think that there's still a lot. There is a lot that needs to be done. Right? Like the civil rights did not end. It did not end like racism. I think there was I remember I wrote this when I was in middle school. I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and I think I got like the general gist of things, the concept of, and sort of the environment in which Malcolm grew up, just sort of the conditions by which he grew up and his people grew up, and what led him to adopting a certain type of philosophy. Like I got like the general sense of that, but there were like conceptually, when you're like 12, you just cannot fully understand these things. And so I think I remember I wrote this. I might still actually have this writing somewhere. So I think it was like every week you're supposed to write like a little report maybe like a 1-page report to your teacher about what you read. And I remember I wrote like a little bit about Malcolm X, and I wrote something along the lines of, I don't remember what the context was, but it was like, oh, when, this and this, it's like when racism was illegal, right? Is something along the lines of what I wrote. And, obviously, like, you can't fault 12-year-old me for having like a pretty, a fairly loose understanding of discrimination and racism, which extends far back, longer than, the history of the United States, and, anything just involving the creation of this country, although a lot of it is based around those constitutional laws. But it was just not like, that it's just conceptually, that's just like not correct, right? Like, there are things in place that, it is unlawful to discriminate, but it, like, racism, the concept of racism in itself is not like, it's not illegal. It's like the actions by which you administer your philosophy might be whatever, like employers cannot discriminate based on race, sex, gender, whatever, right? Like nationality, those kinds of things, like technically, right? But the concept of like, you can't need racism simply after like Martin Luther King walked and the Civil Rights Act was signed. Like, that's not that's not how that worked, right? Like, I think a lot of people, including myself, honestly, like, I think saw it was like the Civil Rights Act, like, post that, it was like, oh, this concept of, segregation was just like ended, and that's like not true, right? That is not true at all. There is still, of course, there are still an insurmountable amount of issues that are just surrounding the concept of race, with like Black Americans, and now kind of in the sense of immigrants, I think especially, are kind of the target of these campaigns and these actions set by the current administration, right? So I think you have to kind of look at things like that. The 60s was not, like, the 60s were 60 years ago. That's like a generation. That's like one person ago. It's not very long. It's not very long at all. People still remember that time. People, still are affected by that time. And while we're seeing kind of this sort of state terrorism, if you want to call it that, currently, like, that is just almost a symptom, or rather a result of the actions that have taken place in the past, right? It is just another instance of that. So I think that is something that I have to kind of remind myself, as well as, thinking about what I can do instead of reacting in the moment, but like, giving myself a little bit of time before actually doing something, but also recognizing the historical context by which we are currently under and what came before it too, right? The the amount of history that kind of led to this point is not a mistake, right? Like, these things have happened before. People have been murdered by the government previously, and that's not news, right? I just think that the way in which it is covered, the way in which it is documented, has changed how it is perceived by the public, right? So if it probably feels a little bit more shocking in that sense to a lot of people. There's just this sense of anger, I think, because of how widely spread these images and these, you know, these kind of moments are. So, yeah, I think that's kind of what I've been mulling over my mind, seeing the news, seeing what's going on in Minneapolis and stuff. I've been very, I think I've done a pretty good job in terms of, for this podcast specifically, in like, essentially kind of keeping this as, for a certain, maintaining this for like a certain purpose, which is for fun, entertainment, and stuff like that. And for so I haven't really come on here to talk about current, if like real shit, current events in quite some time, but it really feels that we're kind of at this impasse almost in terms of what's going on. And I just felt, I don't really care all that much who hears this, honestly. Like, I just felt the need to kind of just talk about it out loud so that I didn't feel like I was kind of going crazy. You know what I mean? I just felt the need to kind of just say it out loud for myself, just to kind of give myself a little bit of, I don't want to say sanity, but just give myself a little bit of equilibrium in that sense. So, yeah, it happens, again and again. And I think the only thing that you can do is not get bogged down. You have to think about what came before. Think about all of the people who have fought for us as Americans. I'm talking, specifically Americans, to get to this point where we are allowed to do the things that we are able to do and have our so-called rights, but understand that it is not, we're far from it being this ideal, and a lot of people are still affected by it. And I think that there are things that still need to be, that still need to be improved in order for this to become like a salvageable situation. So I don't know. I would like to do what I can in terms of, helping out people, reaching out to people and stuff like that. So I'll try my best to do that while also taking care of myself at the same time, right? So trying to kind of strike that balance of sorts during this whole period. So yeah, that's kind of where my head's been at. Yeah, I don't know if I'll talk anymore about it outside of this, outside of today. If something, I don't know, if anything else happens that I feel the need to just speak out, just speak aloud and just kind of speak my mind on, I'll do so. But I think that's it for now. Other than that, NBA, it almost feels like secondary, kind of. But Warriors won this weekend in Minnesota. I did not watch that game. It just didn't feel right to watch it, but they won that game. I I don't know. I still, it's entirely possible for them to squeak in to the playoffs. I think that they're right above, they're like right teetering above 500 right now. So they have a decent record. It's not great, obviously, but decent for Western Conference standards. So I don't know. I don't really have too much to say analytically because I didn't watch the game. I haven't really watched a lot of their games. I haven't really watched a lot of basketball games, period. But I think we're just, I think I'm ready for the kind of like the All-Star break, honestly. I think there just needs to be like a break for, I need some like time before I get back into basketball. Like it can continue, whatever. I'll catch up on stuff. But yeah, I probably won't be like super tapped in. And then on top of that, I have, the other things that I need to kind of work on as well. So that's just kind of where I'm at with it. I hope that they can continue to be successful despite the Butler injury. But we'll see. We'll see. I'm just like not trying to I'm not expecting anything from the rest of this season. If they somehow get into the playoffs, awesome, right? As I mentioned. So really no expectations though. I would say the only other thing that I've been kind of doing, so I've been continuing to play 100 line defense, and yeah, let's talk about it. So I completed sort of like the main route of the game, and I don't know if I mentioned this, but last time, but you essentially, I don't want to get too into it, but you essentially get to like one ending, and then you have the choice of kind of continuing forward and stuff like that. And there are, I think, 100 endings for this game. So I think my mentality, because I do want to see through, they're just kind of chipping away at it. There's more secrets that get revealed and some more things that get uncovered. You get more interesting character interactions and different routes and stuff like that, which you probably wouldn't have in just one single route, which I think is cool. I like the way in which characters act differently in like these different timelines or whatever you want to call it. So I think it's really fun. It's really fun, and it makes me want to just kind of keep going through it like almost like in a book, like a chapter sort of way. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I want to get to the end of this chapter to see kind of what develops. And I do like, so kind of how I've approached this game is, I try to get through each like route, and just kind of go all the way through to see, what the end of these routes are. Sometimes there's like nothing. It's pretty, sometimes there's not like a whole lot. You get some reveals, but for the most part, it's not really too much. And then afterwards, you pick them, you make another decision, and you go down a different route and stuff. I do like that there are some routes are a lot heavier than others. They're a lot more darker, a lot more grittier, and you can kind of choose. It's almost a choose your own adventure in the sense where, if you really don't want to do that, you can kind of decide how much of the game you want to see, because you really don't need to do everything. I just happen to want to see as much as I can. I want to see kind of what like the truth of the whole story is, right? But you can kind of play. It's like if you're happy with like a certain ending, you can just enjoy that one, and then it's like, all right, I played the game, I got the sort of the ending that I wanted, and I can kind of move on. But I think it's a lot of fun to kind of just sort of explore these different routes. Again, characters act differently in certain in these routes because of the decisions that you make and the relationship that you build with them in each of these specific routes. So I think it's really cool to get those different kinds of like character dynamics and that kind of thing. So that's been a lot of fun. I will say, there is this kind of calendar thing. I know, like, I harped on it with Three Houses and Persona and stuff like that. But you really don't need to do it, honestly. You really don't need to engage with any of that. You can kind of skip through the days. And a lot of the time you do, like, the game itself just kind of skips through you through these days where it's like your character is just like too tired to do anything, so you like sleeps through the day and stuff like that. So it's really not that big of a deal if you don't want to engage with like the other gameplay aspects. I happen to just like kind of want to dabble with them because it allows you to have like some additional character interactions and that kind of thing. So that's kind of fun. But if you really just want to focus on story, you can do that. There's there's gameplay options for that, and you can just just solely focus on story. You can ramp up the difficulty to make the battles more difficult and that kind of thing, which might add a little bit of challenge and some fun there for you. But yeah, there's ways in which you can make this work for you. But I choose to kind of try to have a balance of some gameplay and some of I would say mostly story, mostly visual novel stuff. I think that takes up like 80% of the game, honestly, and maybe like 20% is like battles and other stuff. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and I don't think I'm not like gonna complete this game anytime soon. I'll see how far I can go. But I do want to continue along to see as much as I can before I either start to get busy or maybe I just need to kind of take a step away from this game. But so far it's been great. And yeah, I think it's just something that I'm going to be kind of chipping away at as I progress. But yeah, I think not a ton to discuss today. Mostly just wanted to get my thoughts off on what I discussed before. And yeah, it's been a little bit, I'm sort of posting at me being sick kind of these past like few days also kind of affected my ability to really do anything. Hopefully I can kind of get back into the swing of things. I have not worked out at all because of being sick, so that's been kind of I've been kind of missing doing that. So once I recover, hopefully I can kind of get back into the swing of things and back into some type of routine that I'm more familiar with. So anyways, that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for listening. As always, this has been Save the Semantics, signing off.